Hi, everybody. Just a technical to start up. There's a Wi-Fi. It's embassy guest, I believe, and the password is Digital Italy. If you want to tweet during the event, our hashtag is Digital Diplomacy. And if you have any question, you can also ask the questions through social media using hashtag AskDiplomats. So let me actually start by thanking you all for coming here. I'll give you the floor, Ambassador, right away. If you want to take the podium. Sure. Ambassador Bisogniero, the Italian ambassador to the United States.
Yes, good afternoon, buonasera. It's a great pleasure to welcome all of you here to the Italian Embassy in Washington, D.C. in this rainy late May day. You should see the traffic outside. I guess there will be some people coming pretty late towards the end of this event, but it's a great pleasure to have you here because this is yet another event that we do in the framework of our digital diplomacy series here at the Italian Embassy. It is something we started nearly 2 years ago in the fall of 2012, devoting time and interest and energy to the way in which we can use and bring forward all the tools of digital diplomacy. And this is very important, particularly here in the nation's capital. It is very important for the diplomatic community. It's very important for the users of the digital diplomacy tools, and for the academic communities, and for everybody, frankly, who's interested in foreign policy at this particular age. I would like to thank in particular the young professionals in foreign policy group. They have been a great partner in setting up today's event. And when they came to us, when the young professionals in foreign policy group came to us, they came with the perspective of the millennial generation. A generation has grown up with digital and social media tools, and is now looking at a few things. Number one, how to better use those tools outside the personal networks of friends, of contacts, if you wish. And number two, they're looking at what comes next in terms of engagement, in terms of communication, outreach, and public diplomacy. So why are we here today? Well, first of all, we had a great panel, but we're here today because we want to explore the future of digital diplomacy and digital engagement, while social media have become, for many diplomats, frankly, including myself, an indispensable daily tool. Engagement still remains an open and not totally defined area, an area in which a number of issues like contents, strategy, followers, likes, analytics, charisma, and maybe a bit of luck are all key components for the success of any online campaign. So today, a great panel will guide us through how the administration engages with citizens and foreign audiences. It will also tackle how digital tools have changed both the policies and the communications, how those tools allow to engage with audiences in a real, true dialogue. And this is a dialogue that we need to nurture. We need to nurture this dialogue at all levels and in all sectors, including foreign policy and diplomacy. I was talking about tools. I will say how much digital tools are key to a diplomat today, to an ambassador today. Unfortunately, I will not be able to sit and to say through the panel discussion because, talking about tools, I will be hosting another diplomatic tool, a working dinner at Villa Firenze at my residence in a very few moments with the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. So you see how varied the life of an ambassador, a diplomat in the 21st century actually is. So let me thank all of you who are here today. Let me thank our panelists for what I'm sure will be an extremely interesting conversation. So let me now give the floor to Gary Barnabo, President of the Young Professionals in Foreign Policy. Thank you so much once again.
I was saying to the panelists outside a few minutes ago that my family traces its roots to northern Italy, and I am sure of that because the ambassador said my last name absolutely perfectly, which is very rare when speaking with Americans or people from the Commonwealth. It's an absolute pleasure for me on behalf of Young Professionals of Foreign Policy to welcome all of you here tonight. Mr. Ambassador, thanks so much to you and to your team for hosting us in this beautiful embassy. It's a beautiful space. We're so grateful to you to bring us into your digital diplomacy series. Andrea, you have been just a superstar in helping us get ready for this tonight. And we're so appreciative to you and to your colleagues for having us here tonight, for your hard work that's gone into this event. Young Professionals in Foreign Policy has a mission to foster the next generation of foreign policy leaders. And we're celebrating our 10th anniversary in 2014. And in the last decade, we've grown from a very small group of people who had an inkling in Washington, D.C. that there was space for a big tent organization that could train and equip and prepare the next generation of leaders to a global network of more than 10,000 people in 70 countries around the world. In the late 2000s, we opened chapters in New York, London, and Brussels. And the beginning of 2014, we launched what we call our Global Presence Initiative, which takes the successful YPFP model to the grassroots, to young people in cities all over the world. And we've established 3 hubs in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa to further expand YPFP. And I'm really excited to share with you tonight that the first hub that we brought online in 2014 was in Rome. So some of our colleagues in Rome tonight, it's late there, of course, but I believe they're up late watching this live streaming through Google+, and I'm going to be really excited in their feedback on the conversation this evening. The mission of YPFP is to foster young people to become the type of leaders we know the world needs to solve critical global challenges, but it's also about tapping the power of the millennial generation and understanding what we can do now, what young people can do right now, early in their careers to influence the direction of foreign policy. And in that context, we are digital natives. So talking about digital diplomacy, I think for us it's natural. We're used to seeing ambassadors on Twitter. You know, the fact that Twitter and Facebook were the tools that helped catalyze the Arab Spring, certainly not responsible for it, but helped catalyze it, seems normal to us. So we're a generation that's coming of age in a world that is more connected, is more digitally engaged, where the social media tools, technology tools are allowing people to organize in interesting and profound and very surprising ways. I say foreign policy for our generation isn't about countries and governments, it's about people and networks, and we're certainly seeing that play out around the world today. The message control that our generation will have, the challenges around message control, I think will be profound. It's no longer a head of state or an ambassador walking out to deliver a message to shape the environment, but the speed at which information flows across these informal channels and through adaptive networks is going to challenge all of us as young people to understand what can we do, how do we have a voice, how do we have real influence. The example I often use is the Osama bin Laden raid. One of the truly the most secretive operations in military history was live tweeted. You're all familiar with that, right? Of the computer programmer and a bot about sort of tweeting the raid as it happened. That's the environment that we're in and that we're going to be in for the future. And I think there's a tendency among millennials occasionally to think, okay, well, this is it. This is the way the world is. But we need to be very cognizant of the limitations of digital diplomacy. To the ambassador's point, it's about tweeting on his way to dinner at his residence, but it's also about what business is going to get done in that conversation around the dinner table. And whether it's Syria, it's Russia and Ukraine, it's the Iranian nuclear issue, there are real limitations to what can be accomplished with technology tools. And we need to keep that in mind. So I'm very interested in having the panelists this evening explore the sort of tension that we're seeing between the diplomacy of old and the diplomacy of new. Thank you, Ambassador. Again, we're delighted to be here, delighted to be partnering with you and your team. Andrea, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Gary. So today we're here to talk about engagement. So why engagement, and why didn't we put in the title digital engagement? Well, engagement, as both the Ambassador and Gary said before, is both online and offline. So here we want to talk about all different forms of engagement, but where engagement is going in the future. So what comes after we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, what's next, what's beyond that? And we have a fabulous panel today. I'm actually going to start very quickly asking a question to each one, introducing them to you, and then we're going to open for a Q&A. We're going to start with Joe Trippi. Joe has worked on presidential campaigns since the very beginning, since the late 70s. From Ed Kennedy to most recently John Edwards, but you worked internationally as well. You worked with Tony Blair and Romano Prodi as well in Italy, and in Greece as well, Papandreou.
Yes.
You're the first person that started to use social media in a presidential campaign, and that is now the sort of day-to-day of any presidential campaign and any campaign, a political campaign in general, not just in the US, but over in Europe as well. We just had the European elections for the parliament. So let me actually start with a question. How, first of all, would you define engagement in the digital age, and how do you see politics changing since the beginning when we started to use blogs, and you started with Meetup and now Twitter and Facebook?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, thanks for having me here. It is a beautiful embassy. It's the first time I've been here. It's an amazing, beautiful place. Engagement is the most important thing. Is the connection. Carville used to say here in our political campaigns that it's the economy stupid. It's no longer the economy stupid. It's the network stupid, and the network is growing every day. More people globally, not just in the States but everywhere, are coming online or have a smartphone that's connected. And the one thing I want to caution is that we're just scratching the very primitive stages of any of this. Network speed doubles every 9 months. The computing power in these things are on your desk or anywhere. Capacity doubles every 2 years. So the change that you saw from 25 years ago when 19 or so, when the very first computer ever got put on the internet, it was the next computer designed by Steve Jobs. That computer was on, the World Wide Web was born, and 20 years later there's 2.5 billion machines on it. That's 2.5 billion people connected. 6 or 7 billion now by cell phones that can connect with each other. That capacity is and that is empowering more people every day, and is limiting the power at the top or diminishing it for ambassadors and others to communicate. The filter's broken. Governments now can actually communicate through social media directly with citizens from another country without going through the filter of ambassador to ambassador, or leader to leader, if they choose to do so, and so can other, bad players or others. So I think the most important thing, and I use the Nigeria, the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. There'll be people who will argue on both sides of that, but I think that, great, what's a tweet do? Well, if that many millions of people globally are connected, I mean, the most important thing about that was that many people are today connected in some way. There's somebody in the United States who's connected to somebody in Italy, who's connected to somebody in France, who has the same. They are connected and joined together in a community. Whether that community, and then you get to the other side, the problem. Great, that can put pressure on. It can make governments move faster or do things. On the other hand, if all those girls are freed tomorrow, and I hope they will be, but if they are freed tomorrow, it doesn't solve the Boko Haram terrorism problem that killed 33 police officers and security people yesterday, and it's continuing. So there's the most important thing, to answer your question, is engagement right now, I think, means connecting all those people, that you're not alone, that you actually agree with other people globally or in your country about something. And I think digital diplomacy or public diplomacy is understanding that from a government level and starting to use that as a tool to make a difference in the way people are joining together.
And that actually brings me to Nate Lubin. Actually today from the White House is the acting director of digital strategy. He was the digital director for the Presidential Inaugural Committee and the director of digital marketing for Obama for America. Actually, today the White House hosted the second hackathon, which brought to the White House coders and developers and hackers. Often we refer to hackers in a negative way, but today was a day to refer to hackers in a very positive way.
Taking back the word.
And it's actually a way to sort of like help with a change. So can you tell us a little bit on what the hackathon is and the We the People platform, which is a sort of link to the hackathon as well?
Absolutely. So echoing, thanks so much for having me here. This is a great event and an honor to be here. For those of you who don't know, the We the People platform is a petitions platform on the White House site. We in the White House digital team have a few different missions. One is to explain the president's policies and offer some insight into why he thinks what he thinks when it comes to what he's doing. But we also have a role in terms of transparency into what's going on and engaging the public directly. We have sort of a unique opportunity to have people interact directly with the White House administration and to give feedback. So that takes a number of different formats. We do things that a lot of folks in this room probably are familiar with, like Twitter chats and other engagements. We work with sites that aren't the White House all the time to have conversations with American people directly. But one of the kind of primary ones that we're really excited about is We the People. And the reason for that is we have pledged that if enough people sign on about a particular topic, we will reply to that. And so far, more than 13 million different people have actually done that. And today is the next step in that, which is we are currently working on a set of tools that will allow other sites, so places around the internet that also do petitions, to join in and kind of work with us directly, so that folks who are passionate about an issue, whether that's a foreign policy one or a domestic one, whatever it may be, can work with us. So the event today was we have a beta of this project right now. It's hopefully going to come out of beta quite soon, TBD, so stay tuned for that. But we had a number of developers from places like Microsoft, petitions platforms like Change.org and Care2, and some other individuals and folks who were on site and working with us to kind of lay the groundwork for the next round. So hopefully there'll be millions more people who have a chance to ask the White House administration more generally to answer a question that they feel passionately about. We won't always agree with them, but we will definitely take their questions seriously and make sure that we have an opportunity. And that's really valuable, not just for them, but for us, particularly in an environment where it's very often difficult to have a message heard. What this platform does is it takes people who are really interested in a topic and gives us a way to talk to them. And that's incredibly valuable on any issue, and one that we're really excited to continue working on.
Thank you very much. And from the White House, we go to State Department. So the White House mostly talks to citizens in the United States. The State Department talks to citizens abroad. Hilary Brandt, she's the Director of Innovative Engagement at the State Department. She oversees research and development of new tools, and you provide support for the department's 200-plus social media practitioners. And outreach, you do outreach to the tech industry. You were previously Director of Digital Communication at ECA, which is part of IIP, if I'm not...
That's the people who run exchange programs.
Yeah. And where you pioneering use of social media and new responsive, adaptive website. So again, the State Department sort of engages with foreign public. And if you look at the title of your office, Innovative Engagement, can you just give us a little bit of information on how the State Department would define first innovation on, and then engagement?
Sure, absolutely. And again, I echo thanks to you and to YPFP for hosting this event. It's a lot of fun to be here. how public diplomacy is done at the State Department, there is an entire, there are 3 bureaus that engage in public diplomacy, overseen by Rick Stengel, our undersecretary. And the first one is what we call public affairs, and these are the folks who are the voice of the secretary, and they work on the news of the day. If you ever see a State Department briefing on television, they're the ones who run that. They run the State Dep Twitter handle, and so they're very focused on what's happening right now, and they're in the news cycle. Sort of at the other end of the spectrum in public diplomacy at the department is the bureau that Andreas just mentioned, ECA, or Educational and Cultural Affairs. These are the people who run the Fulbright program that you may have heard of. They also run a range of programs in cultural diplomacy or sports diplomacy. So those are the sort of long-term relationship building activities in public diplomacy in the department. In the middle, I would say, is my bureau, International Information Programs. And we are under the leadership of Macon Phillips, formerly of the White House. And it's a really exciting time to be in my bureau in IIP with Macon. We sort of, like I said, we're sort of in the middle. We don't focus on necessarily on the news of the day, but we look at long-term engagement. We work digitally, of course, but we also have brick and mortar spaces. So there are around 700 American spaces around the world where they have real life events. And I think as power continues to shift to the people, it's all the more important for foreign policy that we engage with the people directly. And that's where IIP, I think, has a great opportunity to play a leading role in foreign policy, to make foreign policy relevant to people, to connect people with the policy. And so I think one area where we are looking to innovation, certainly it's new tools. We're always looking at new platforms to use, but we don't want to just use a new tool for the sake of it. It has to really serve a purpose. We do, we call it, I guess you'd say, focused innovation. So, certainly we experiment with new things, but we want to make sure it serves a purpose. And we are, I think, a big area that we're moving into is digital first. And so my bureau produces lots of publications, and we do a lot of writing. But we need to turn that around so that we're producing for digital first rather than print first. And so we're in the process of doing that. The idea being our materials can be seen on a mobile phone, but they can also be on a bookshelf. You can create it digitally, but then also have it in print if you need it. And I think just to, sort of an example of public engagement we're doing right now is the YALE network. So this is the Young African Leaders Initiative network. You can find them on Twitter. John Kerry did a web chat with the network recently. And the idea here was it is an actual exchange program, Young African Leaders Initiative, but very few people can get onto this program. Out of the 50,000 applications, 500 people are coming. So what do you do with the rest of the folks who went through this complicated application, expressed a genuine interest in the United States? You can't just leave them. You have to, so we're working in IIP to continue to engage them and build the network virtually. And then also through our American spaces, offer them real-life experiences as well. So I think that's definitely a new area that we're moving into at State Department.
Thank you. I'll move now to Adam Smith. Most of you probably don't know the name, but if you look on Google at one picture, a specific one picture of Hillary Clinton, you see her texting, and Adam Smith is the person who's behind famously sort of putting out that picture, and with a blog that lasted for a week. The blog went viral. It's called Text from Hillary. It was April 2012. I have just saw like a few info on the blog, 83,000 shares on Facebook, and that's in a week. 10,000 plus followers on Twitter, 40,000 followers on Tumblr, and after all, a mention on the first tweet by Hillary Clinton in June 2013. So let me actually ask you, how would you define engagement, and how can you bring engagement to the next level so that you can become viral and engage as many people as possible?
It's a good question. I think if we all had the recipe to make everything we do viral, the person who figures that out will make a lot of money. I think that for us, why I think Dad became popular, and I thought a lot about it, is because she won Hillary Clinton. The timing of it was like in the doldrums of the 2012 primaries. Everybody was just like, are we still doing this? Is this still happening? And so it was something that my friend and I just were at the bar, and we thought it was funny. And we did it, and then all of a sudden it's this huge thing, and here I am 2 years later talking about it. So for my day job is I work in politics. I do communications for a nonprofit, and we have to figure out how do we get people engaged, especially people who are really cynical about government. And I work in money and politics, and for anybody who knows, our system is crazy, and I think it should be better than it is. But people are really cynical. They don't trust Congress. They don't trust Washington is working for them. And so for us, it's how do you get past that cynicism, and how do you get people really engaged. And I think that for me, a lot of it is making sure you have a voice, that you have a consistent voice as an organization. People believe in you, they believe in the work that you do, and they believe you're being genuine and sincere in the stuff that you're putting out, and you're not trying to put anything past them or tell them stuff that's not true. I think that's my short answer.
Do you think that sincerity translates into transparency, for instance? So if people are on Facebook and Twitter or any social media out there, any digital tool that makes not only the politician or the ambassador or a government more transparent?
I think it makes them seem more transparent. Whether they are or not is another question. I have less international ramifications of the work that I do than the ambassador. But I think that if people think that this person is being sincere and genuine, I think they believe they're being more transparent.
What do you think that transparency is becoming a big part of engagement, or or engagement is actually bringing transparency to the process, both nationally and internationally?
The first thing on answer your question about how to get things to go viral, cats, I think, has proven to be very important. But no, I think it's not. Since it's authenticity. The more authentic the government or the messaging is, the less, which is a problem for diplomats because they tend to smooth over the words, and there's actually inauthenticity to it because of how stilted the verbiage tends to be. But I think the most important thing is authentic. If you're authentic, the television kind of got us used to faking it. Makeup, anybody can fake it for that short time they have to stand in front of the camera, or most people can without kind of gaffing. But there's something about this medium and the connectiveness that if there's any sense at all that you're not authentic, that you're not real, you're dead. They will not, and that's one of the reasons authority, I think, is losing. In the top is losing some of its power because it learned, all of us as communications people learned in the fake TV age, and now we're trying to communicate in this thing that demands authenticity, that connects more with your friend, your neighbor, your coworker, and we don't like that kind of up high kind of feeling of the verbiage. And so the more authentic you can be, and yes, the more transparent you can be, I think you're going to be able to have a much better connection with the citizens of another country, or at least get them to believe that you're honestly dealing with them, put it that way.
Do you think that, I'm going to ask Nate and Hilary, do you think that authenticity translates into sort of like when your bosses are on social media, and if they're really on social media or not? Because part of the engagement process is to sort of be as Joe said, like being authentic, and the more authentic you are, or you're perceived to be, the more engaging you are to the public. So, do you think that the sort of role of the leader, of your leader, State Department John Kerry, and the White House President Obama, is that important in that authenticity process of making the White House and the State Department the most authentic they can be? I don't know.
Sure. To be sure, it is. I would say, these are, as the ambassador said earlier, these are tools first and foremost. So you can misuse tools, or you can use tools well. It sort of depends on what you're actually doing. Some of the content that we put out that does particularly well tends to be what is truest to the vision of the people that we're trying to represent. And I think that's a factor of the fact that the people who are subscribing to our channels and are interested in our channels are active consumers of it. So if we're doing a good job, it's because we are giving voice to ideas that are already there. I think some of the most successful things that we've done have been trying to do that. So one example of that would be during the State of the Union process, which is a very active time around the White House, one that everyone is running around like crazy trying to keep track of what's going on. We were on a program that was in the weeks before trying to do inside State of the Union. So we gave the president's lead speechwriter an opportunity to take over our Instagram account. And then we did that subsequently with other people in the White House. And that was a way of seeing through his eyes what he was doing. And that had a tremendous following, and people were very interested in it. So it's absolutely true of the president, but it doesn't have to be just from that perspective. Any way that's going to be creating a point of view and a sense of substance that's honest and true is going to be one that folks definitely engage with.
And it's probably similar, true at the State Department with not just John Kerry, but also ambassadors around the world.
Right, absolutely. I think there are some great examples of very authentic sort of Twitter presences at State Department. John Kerry, first and foremost, he's good at mixing sort of personal and professional and letting you have a sort of a peek behind the curtain. Often at State Department, we find social media works well when you give people sort of an inside look at what we're doing. Instead of the picture of the ambassador at the podium, you have his view of the audience, that sort of thing. Has worked well. I think there are several ambassadors who have a very authentic presence and have remarkably taken on social media and are very comfortable in the medium. I think another big part of it is also meeting the audience where it is, and it's particularly challenging at the State Department because we're in so many countries. The variations in how you need to communicate are almost incalculable. So a lot of times you'll see the embassy accounts, they'll very much adapt to the local communication style. Some countries, they're on Twitter and they're very fast at Twitter. It's a very chatty culture. Other countries, they're more into Facebook and a slower pace. And so I think part of it is meeting the other cultures where they are, on the platforms where they are, and the mediums. We had one embassy stage a Twitter chat about visas, which was incredibly popular, and they were trying hard to keep up with the conversation. So much to they were tweeting so quickly at one point that Twitter thought they were spamming, and so they shut them down briefly in the middle of this really popular Twitter chat. But they were just trying to adapt to the local culture. They were back up and running pretty soon, but that's just sort of a funny example of we're trying to adapt and change, and had a little bit of a mishap there. But I think, just meeting people where they are is a big part of it as well.
Let me actually ask Lauren. She's actually helping us with collecting questions from Twitter and Facebook and other social media. Do we have any?
We do.
Okay. sorry. There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, panelists. My name is Lauren Greeley. I'm one of the representatives of Young Professionals from Foreign Policy. We've been collecting some tweets from social media, and we got one from Digital Globe that I thought was particularly interesting. They said, at YPFP, in politics, engagement translates into votes and fundraising. What about in foreign policy? #AskDiplomats. So open question to any of our panelists.
Who wants to, do you want to?
Well, it's like I in the example I used. I think again, I think we're at the every person in public diplomacy using digital right now to reach out to the public is a pioneer. There's been a lot of pioneering that occurred in politics in the campaign mode, starting from 2003, and actually in every 4 years you've seen how the tools and everything have changed. We are literally at the very first stages of that in public diplomacy. And there've been pioneers and people doing it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we're just scratching the surface, and which I think is in the early stages can be very frustrating for people. Again, using Bring Back Our Girls as a great example of it. I think it's an amazing thing in the way it connected people, and I think that's going to be a very important tool moving forward. The more globally we're all connected, the harder it's going to be to divide us. And so I think that there are very many aspects, but the tool sets haven't moved yet as fast as we'd like them to. They're going to, but they're still going to be very limiting, because it's very easy for the public to say "Bring back our girls." It's very difficult for the diplomats that are doing the back channel negotiations, or they're not supposed to be talking to the terrorist group. Therefore, I mean, there's all kinds of other things that are going on, and I think that's how the public gets used to that inconsistent thing, where you're both trying to be authentic and communicate at the same time having to deal with a very complicated diplomatic situation or anti-terror multi-government framework to go in and deal with the situation. That's not something that Twitter's going to solve for you. You want to engage the public. You want to give them as much information as you can. You want to get them connected and engaged in a positive way. But at the same time, they're getting very frustrated because of the other real politics that have to go on in a more and more complicated world. That, frankly, a lot of the complication comes from the technology that we're using to do this. And so I don't think there's a good answer to that question right now. But I do have, if you look at how politics developed the tools and the power of those tools became bigger and stronger and put them in the hands of individuals by leaps and bounds every few years. That is going to happen in public diplomacy. It is going to happen in the way we're all connected. There will be, at some point, 6 billion people connected, not 2.5, and all that is a good thing.
And I think also that connectivity is like working at all levels, even within State Department, but also within different governments. Like, for instance, our diplomats are now focusing on digital diplomacy in ways of sort of like using social media at best. There's different governments, the United States, Italy, the UK, France, Sweden, they are working together for creating the most engagement possible. For instance, United for Ukraine was one of the initiatives where many governments worked together to make it work and make it the most successful possible, especially during Obama's trip to the recent trip to Europe. Let me actually ask the public if you have any questions. Can you just state your name and affiliation?
Hi, it's John Hudson with Foreign Policy Magazine. I just had a question for Ms. Brandt. You said that there's never been a better time or more exciting time to be at IIP. I was just wondering, IIP has obviously taken a bit of a bruising recently in Inspector General reports after spending $630,000 towards Facebook likes to little effect, and kind of widespread reports of morale issues there under the previous leadership. And also, they've been constrained by that ability to, be authentic when you have to deal with a large bureaucracy. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how dealing with those challenges has changed under the new leadership, and how the institution itself is improving.
Oh yeah, that's an easy. No problem. Oh gosh. Well, the fact of the matter is, IIP works in a challenging space. Change is a fact of life for us. The communications landscape changes constantly. And I think with our new leadership, we are learning to embrace that as opportunity rather than heartburn. And so if you're working in an ever-changing space, think of all the professional opportunities you have to do different things. Andreas mentioned the United for Ukraine campaign. There are many people in IIP who had no idea they'd be working on something like this, and it's been a very exciting, productive time for the Bureau. And we've been able to partner with our other public diplomacy bureaus to carry this out. I think with our current leadership, we've had a renewed emphasis on data-informed decision-making, and so we're going to be working on that within our own bureau, but also trying to spread the culture of data throughout the department when it comes to communications. And there's also a renewed focus on people, and that can be the end user. What is the end user's experience? Really getting focused on that. But also, what is the experience of other people in the department working with IIP? We're going to be working on that. And also focus on people within the Bureau. So we live in an ever-changing space, and if any of you want to work in communications, this will also be part of your life. That we're going to have continuing education, continual training to make sure that we have those skills that we need to keep up. And so, yeah, it's a challenging place to be in. But it's also really exciting, and there's a lot of opportunity.
Other questions? Yeah.
Sure. I can speak loud enough.
Can we use the other one by any chance? Can we use that one?
Otherwise, I can.
Sorry.
Thanks. I'm Jonas with the Embassy of Denmark. One question on this, the hashtag Unite for Ukraine. And I thought, do you do any sort of measurements on impact and evaluate afterwards? Also because it's when you let it loose, the Russian MFA also used this and sort of wanted to chip in on sort of how we're all united for Ukraine. So that was one question. Second question would be to you specifically, Hilary, but also generally on the way of sort of engaging diaspora. US is a country made up of immigrants from many different parts. You use that in ways of sort of engaging, both of explaining foreign policy, but also basically of making it, of saying when there are lots of, be it Somali, Pakistani, you in any way use social media to engage in the way policies around countries where also people come from are based. So what are your experiences with this?
I can speak to measurement. I think United for Ukraine is an especially good example of how we used measurement from the very beginning. So we had analytics specialists with us at the table when we were creating that campaign, and it really was about bringing all the skills to the table right in the beginning, and doing a little bit of planning and having specific goals. We didn't have a lot of time, so it wasn't like we were creating documentation or anything, but we wanted to make sure that what we were trying to achieve was clear from the beginning. And so we had, the social media people who were listening to the community at the table, the analytics person who could, look at the Google Analytics and the other tools we have, and the content people who had good production value, knew how to make attractive graphics and things like that. So data-informed decision-making is in its beginning, I would say, in a lot of ways, but that campaign in particular was one where we used it right from the beginning. So, I don't know.
Going back to analytics, when we talk about engagement, we usually talk about numbers, and technology is usually about numbers. Do you think that those numbers are key elements, or we should look elsewhere when we use social media tools or digital tools in general? I don't know.
Sure, I'll take that one. So, my previous jobs were on the Obama campaigns. Those was sort of the hallmark of the programs that we were running, was trying to figure out ways to improve over time. And one of the challenges we have in government is the metrics on campaigns are much more straightforward most of the time than they are in government. There's an earlier question about campaigns, and I think this is sort of the central difference is in your fundraising, when you've fundraised. We're trying to take the same sorts of tools but explain complicated policy ideas to people who often are not super interested in them or don't know yet that they are interested in them. So I think one of the first things, I've been in the White House now about a year. One of the first things that was a priority for me was coming in was actually having the first person in our digital team in the White House whose full-time job was on analytics. He was actually a former campaign person. And we've seen immense value in that. I think it's hard to overstate the value in that. It's not just social media metrics. I think we see data itself is often not an online thing, it's an offline thing. So if you're talking about people who are submitting stories about why an issue is important to them, or people who are signing a petition on our site explaining that's important to them. It might be site traffic, it might be Facebook shares, it might be any number of different ways, but trying to put a specific output to measure what's happening, and then not being satisfied by just saying, oh, that was good, that was better than the other time we did that, it's 50% better, but actually taking those learnings and iterating. So taking that philosophy of, each time we run a campaign or we try to run our program, we are building a next step for the subsequent efforts. So that includes things like split tests of sites, which is a thing that you don't usually see in government, but we are trying to make part of our program. So if you're it's not a question of whether you're altering the substance of the content. We know what our substance is going to say, but simple things like how you lay out a page can have huge impacts in terms of whether people actually read to the bottom of it, engage with it, and making sure that we take advantage of every tool that lets us do that can make programs, whether they're dealing with domestic or foreign policy, much more effective.
Actually, I have a question for Adam, and it's about you go through data and information for your job, and do you think that technology has changed the way of sort of like how you're able to look at those information, or making your job much easier than ever before?
Absolutely. I mean, by looking through, my day is like downloading campaign finance spreadsheets, so it's a little bit different. And being able to run those reports, and I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and the fact that oftentimes data like that, like the data that you collect, they're not like the most engaging data at all.
No.
But you use those numbers to sort
tell
of
a story.
Exactly.
Yeah. No. What we do is how do we tell a story based on really big data sets, and that's really hard to do. It's finding trends, and being able to do that. Just the House filing their filings electronically. The Senate, for instance, files their fundraising reports on paper. So you have 800 pages of fundraising reports that are scanned that are mailed to the Senate clerk's office, that are then scanned and then uploaded to the FEC site, and then you bring down as a 700-page PDF. So an example of where government can be better. And that in showing how you tell stories, if there's lots of people coming from one place, or we do lots of stuff with census data, or we compare. You look at donations compared to census data, so you know that the people in the wealthiest neighborhoods are the ones that give the most money. The people in the whitest neighborhoods are the ones that give the most money. And telling stories that way we think is really important, because looking at spreadsheets doesn't tell any story, but if you can gather that data and then make it available to people on putting on maps, using Google Maps to show where fundraisers are, or that sort of thing.
And actually, I have a question about maps, because you launched very recently, a couple months ago, a little longer ago, a tool called MapGive that was also translated into an Italian, so it's actually used in Italy as well. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. So this was a project that we did to try to do a new thing with social media, and to try to take our social media following and give them a call to action, turn them from followers into doers, essentially. And the task we were asking them to help with is digital mapping. And so this is open source map data, and having the crowd create the open source map data, particularly for use in emergencies and for development. So imagine after Haiti or after the typhoon in the Philippines, first responders need a lot of map data so that they know where to go to deliver relief supplies, for instance. And the State Department is involved in this because we take satellite imagery that the US government has purchased, and we release it to the crowd for crowdsourced mapping. So we did this after the typhoon in the Philippines. The idea here is that it's sort of a niche topic. The digital mapping community is small, very passionate, and they don't necessarily communicate well with others. They're doing great work, but it's hard to understand how anybody here could get involved. So our task as communicators in IIP was to make that understandable and make it so that they could get more people involved and get these areas mapped more quickly after a disaster or even in preparation for a disaster. So we found that you can't really explain all of this in a single tweet, so we put an explanatory layer on it. This website that Andreas referred to, it's at mapgive.state.gov, and there it tells you why mapping is important, and it also shows you how to do it. And so we've already had the community taking this on to help get more volunteers involved. Andreas referred to somebody who was so inspired that we have the code on GitHub, which is I don't know how you probably are better explaining it. It's a place where you can put your code up and people can take it down and repurpose it and maybe add it back up, enhance it, and put it back up. But he took the site down and he translated everything into Italian, and then he put it back up, and so that now there's an Italian MapGive, which is fantastic. So in any case, check it out when you get a chance. It's also on Twitter at MapGive.
Any question? Yeah.
Hi there. Hello. Hi there. So I'm a grantee at an agency that gets a lot of negative comments, negative feedback, posts, that kind of stuff. And I'm just sort of curious, I guess, more to you. Do you quantify that? Do you try to then, let's say, I'm trying to figure out a way to not give away where I work, but do you try to, hydrofracking, for example, so do you try to then address it, or do you just kind of ignore that data? I'm just kind of curious about that. So trolls that just continuously post, the same thing over and over again, does that lead you to any sort of call to action?
I would say, we're aware of what's going on our channels. We don't engage with behavior like that generally. I think, our interest is in mostly around giving positive information about what we're doing. And if we're, asking the public directly for feedback on something, we're going to read what they say, of course. We're going to, if there's an insightful question that we can provide additional value by answering, we want to answer it. But I think that's where it gets to the earlier question about engagement. It has to be for a value and for a purpose. So, we don't have an obligation to reply to everyone just because they asked us a question, but if there's a reason to reply, we're definitely going to try to.
Yep. Over here.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Poling. I'm at the Foreign Policy Initiative and also the Vice Chair of the Africa Discussion Group with YPFP. My question is, well, as Joe was mentioning in the example of the hashtag about Bring Back Our Girls and the issue in Boko Haram, a lot of these foreign policy issues we're dealing with are very complicated, hard-hitting issues. Especially with using Twitter, where you only have 140 characters, particularly with the White House and the State Department, when you're trying to convey a message about these very complex issues. Do you see that as an obstacle, only having so many characters to work with? And if so, how do you overcome that?
I don't think we see it as an obstacle at all. If anything, it's a good gateway to having a deeper conversation if the topic is more complicated than 140 characters. So it's certainly a way, though. I mean, if you were just presenting complicated information and that's it, that's not very accessible. And so I think we actually see it as an opportunity to bring people into deeper topics, linking to a video or however we do it. So I think we see it more as an opportunity to make things more accessible.
Say concision's a virtue. We're all, as just mentioned, links are obviously a big part of programs. So if you're trying to do too much, you're probably doing it wrong. But for a big piece of content that's going to be explaining an issue or trying to do more than that, that's what the website's for. That's what we're often going to have graphics that are going to be larger pieces of content. We even do things like taking screenshots of written statements sometimes to give a bit more information when that's necessary. So I think it's just a use case question mostly, and if you're careful about it, it's not really an obstacle at all.
And I guess it's probably the same when you try to address your voters, your audience, like 140 characters. Sometimes it's like too little, but you have like so much out there that you can use to sort of engage anybody out there.
Yeah, it's like links and again you can link to longer format things if you want to get a broader or deeper message out. One of the things I think that governments aren't or that haven't found a really good way of doing yet is listening. I mean I think they've been many valiant attempts, but when you really look at some of the really big moments out there on social media, another one again going back to Nigeria. Good Luck Jonathan on his Facebook page, a citizen asked him why Nigeria didn't have a consulate in San Francisco, and had a very good economic reason why there should be one, and made the case on his Facebook page. And like 4 days later, the president's saying, I looked into this, you're right, and I ordered my foreign minister to open up a consulate in San Francisco. What was important about that wasn't the exchange, it was the other 600,000 or 700,000 people on Facebook who were following Good Luck Jonathan realized he was actually reading the page, and therefore there was that somebody in government was actually listening to him. The problem that got was all of a sudden 600,000 people had great ideas that they wanted to post on his Facebook page. But he still to this day calls out if there's a good idea on there. Again, the same thing. There's no demand that I've got to. I'm not saying like I'm going to answer everything somebody posts on that page. He's not saying that. But if somebody has a really good idea, they are really actually that somebody's listening and they actually call it out and do something about it. I think one of the so there've been things like that have happened that I've been watching. Australia's has done some good stuff too. In that Nicholas Gruen, when he was in the government, did some interesting things. But I think we're just scratching the surface of how you do all this.
Any other questions down there?
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Dale, and I work at the Spahn Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institution. Since a lot of my research focuses on the GCC, my question is, how do you deal, those of you who reach out to overseas, with censors and with different governments that don't want to deal with social media or any interaction from us?
Well, let's start from the U.S. government. How do you deal, when it comes to data, how do you deal with censors?
There aren't. I mean, it's not. The only issue is that it's very. A lot of times, media is very he said she. I mean, that's when I think about gatekeepers and people keeping the information away. It's how do media frame the stories I'm trying to tell, and it's very he said she said a lot of times. And so for me, it's putting our own stuff out there and saying to people, this story isn't about what you think it is. This politician's wrong. Here's what things really are. Here's what they really mean. And but that's different, I think, than. I think it's different than dealing with governments who won't let you do social media. So,
well, I think a key component of what we do at State Department is we engage sometimes on in-country platforms. So China, where YouTube and Facebook are blocked, we engage on their local social media platforms, Sina Weibo, and have quite a big following there as well. I know there are, like, Voice of America, to get around any internet blocks, they do have an app that will work even if the internet is blocked in general. So there are ways to get around it. I think a key thing at State Department is we do rely on our embassies to know best how to do things in country as well. We don't try to, just direct it all from Washington.
Do you want to add?
My experience is governments are having a really tough time shutting things down that completely. I mean, it's very difficult to do. We did the campaign against Mugabe in Zimbabwe, and he had tried to shut down everything. And we were working for the MDC, and we were able to. That people find ingenious ways around it. I mean, it's not even getting them the app. They'll figure it out, and it really. Is going to be I mean, it's going to become, I think, a bigger problem for governments to try to somehow stop it. I mean, they'll be able to for a while, and then, I mean, the one interesting thing is whether the internet becomes balkanized, where they literally is just a Chinese internet, period, and they wall it off from they just wall it off. That could happen. I think that's one of the things that I think diplomatically, one of the things that I think is important. Is that our diplomats are out there pushing for an open and free internet in every country that they can, and educate people about that, because I think that's the bigger risk, is that is that some countries just wall off. There becomes a Russian internet and a Chinese, and we're all, and there's no way to communicate in at that point.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Niall Cronin from the Embassy of Canada. So first off, I just want to say that I'm quite a big fan of We the People, and I thought your response on the Justin Bieber petition was very, very well done. But what I'd be interested in, I guess, maybe from the White House and State, is a lot of the talk, it sounds like, or it's been unsaid, but the target audience is really general publics, both either here or abroad. Have you seen where kind of digital campaigns or the use of social media has really worked on kind of maybe a more targeted population in terms of decision makers or policy makers in a particular country on a certain issue, where you've been able to work kind of the digital with the maybe, for lack of a better word, more traditional diplomacy or advocacy here at home? Thanks.
Do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think we work on a number of issues that mostly domestic issues, of course, but we're often trying to I guess I would say we're always speaking to the general public, but we don't treat the entire general public equally on all issues. So an example of that, the president last year talked about gave a speech on housing policy, and we followed that with an online event where he was being interviewed by crowdsourced questions on the housing site Zillow. So that was a way of having people who were part of the public, but were already on that platform that was actually distributed more broadly via some other sites as well. But those are people who are by their own actions, by being on that platform, engaged in this issue, care about this issue. They're probably buying a house at that moment. So we, that's a way of kind of getting a more qualified audience. We have campaigns like, the kind of healthcare campaign obviously was one where, there were issues at the beginning, but part of the success story there at the end was because of a really concerted effort that we helped with around trying to reach particularly young people who are a really critical audience for getting enrolled. So things like Between Two Ferns, which maybe folks in this room have seen, was an effort where you might not think the president would do that, but really catered to the particular constituency that we really wanted to reach with them.
And you have metrics from that.
That's right. That's right.
Certainly, also at state, we are engaging with the general public writ large, but within that, within our individual efforts, within a certain campaign, we are moving towards, targeting it more based on foreign policy priorities, and also based on how people want to access us. So we're also looking at, are our different channels structured in ways that people find accessible, where they can get the information they need on how to get on an exchange program or how to get a passport without having to understand the structure of the State Department, right? So I think with our new leadership as well, and in my bureau, there's a new focus on not just explaining America. That's not enough anymore, but we have to engage on actual foreign policy topics. So watch this space. That there's going to be a lot of activity around this. United for Ukraine being one perfect example. So
we'll take one more question because we're already over. Yeah, over there.
I can just be loud. I got a lot. I'm Trippi from Northern Ireland intern with YPFP. So you guys have talked about what makes things go viral, cat videos, for example, or I think a success story with Between Two Ferns and text from Hilary is the fact that it was funny, it used humor. And one of you mentioned that millennial generation were cynical, we're distrustful of government, and I think the best way to use that and to reach that is to use humor. And how do you guys see humor as a role in engaging the general public?
Sure, and I first want to say that you should also be totally okay with failing in things that you do. There are so many websites and Tumblrs and things that I have launched that none of you have ever heard of. But that one you did, and that's all that really mattered. So I think being okay at failing and looking at what you did and why maybe that didn't work, why something didn't take off like you thought it would, I think is really important part of the process. Humor just works for people. People have very serious, stressful lives a lot of times, and if you can somehow go to where they are, or figuring out how to bring in pop culture to the work that they do, there's, when I think about all the stuff, we did a New York campaign. We launched a House of Albany Tumblr. Albany, New York is this really corrupt place. New York politics are really terrible, and so we did this thing where we laid over quotes from criminal indictments on top of gifts from House of Cards, and people liked it. It was like a thing that the New York press picked up, and it was something like that. So it went to where people were. They were at House of Cards. They were watching House of Cards. They were engaged with it, and it tied them to a very real issue that they could act on and create some sort of change.
Do you want to add anything?
I just want to echo what he said about failing. That's what's sort of amazing, like the Facebook thing at State Department. Are you kidding me? Like, we tried. Those were all tools that worked, and if you look at Dean, Obama, any of the stuff, you look at what was working. Well, you're going to try that in government, and half the stuff we tried in the campaigns didn't work the first time we tried it. And sometimes humor doesn't, is the right thing, and sometimes it's not. But right now, if we're gonna build the tools that really build connective tissue in public diplomacy and really connect people together and move in a positive way, yeah, this State Department, the next one, they're gonna try things in social media, or a post out there is gonna try something. It's gonna fail, and in the tech world, how many websites have gone, never made $1 and then had the .com bust and it went out the window. It's unrealistic to think that everything you try is going to be a home run. It's just not going to work that way. Maybe someday it'll all get perfected, and then it'll be just like every other message machine out there, that cookie cutter TV ads. But I don't think that's the way this one's going to work. And I think in the end, I just want to go back to listening. In the past, all these conversations were happening before. They were all happening in a water cooler in an office. They were all happening over your neighborhood fence. The conversation about what do people think about our country, or what do they think about this issue, those were all happening. We had no way to hear them, to listen to them, and no way to talk to them before. And now you do. And I think from engaging people at that level, the extent we can develop the tools that do that, I think it's going to be a big step in participatory democracy and getting people engaged in a positive way.
So I'll take one quick answer at that, which is less about humor, but we put out a video just in the last week, which was the president walking to the Department of Interior, which I think if you watch, you'll probably smile at and laugh at, and it's not intended to be funny, but it's just real. It's a moment in time of seeing this guy who you don't normally get a chance to see like that, being himself with real people. And I think that's where the humor works, because he's talking about to people on the street about things that he cares about things that are important in their lives. He's on his way to have an important event at an agency of government. But that's where it comes in. It's about kind of giving some real insight into the more on the why side than the what side.
Does he usually call himself the bear, or is that just that one time?
First I'd heard of it.
Okay.
And I'm actually going to conclude by, again, talking about listening. Listening is very important. We're still struggling, politicians, diplomats, everywhere. It's still difficult, first of all, because there's so much out there, and it's kind of difficult to really listen to everything, but I think that engagement will be more successful and will be real engagement if we first step off and listen and learn to listen better. And I'm actually going to conclude with a quote from Chief Justice John Marshall from the really early 1800s. He once said, "To listen well is as powerful a means of communication and influence as to talk well." So again, thank you very much for being here today. It's the Digital Diplomacy series is a series, so we're going to have future events. We're going to send out an email for future events, and we hope to host you here at the embassy back again. And thanks to Young Professional in Foreign Policy for partnering with us today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It's just fun. Thanks.
If you if you leave the room right outside, there's going to be food and drinks if you're interested. And thank you for coming. Well, yeah. Let me ask actually the camera if there is